The whole world is being held hostage by the extraordinarily sort of idiosyncratic, unreliable, unpredictable behavior of President Trump. We simply can't anymore stand by and let a rogue America, which is sadly what we've got to, in a sense, still dictate the terms of how peace is made around the world. Israel needs to recognize that even inside the United States, public opinion is moving against it. That Trump is not a bellwether for where America is on this. And, the good people have to gather together around this and create, a forum of counter pressure to the sort of free check that the Trump administration has given the Netanyahu regime until this point.
Today, Britain will formally recognise the state of Palestine, with which it's had diplomatic relations at a lower level for generations. There's been talk of recognition going back to 1917, with an increase of activity following the Six-Day War in 1967, and the government, of course, supports the two-state solutions. Today, Britain and 9 other countries will recognise the Palestinian statehood. But what difference is it really going to make? Let's speak to Professor Malloch-Brown, who is now the ambassador of Palestine to Denmark and was previously the head of mission in London. Hello to you.
Hello, sir.
What do you see, or do you see this as being an important moment for Palestine?
Yes, I see it a very important move. It's a breakthrough. It has been long overdue, the recognition of the state of Palestine by a very important country like the UK, where I served as an ambassador. And I know to what extent I have been struggling to get that kind of recognition. But it is so unfortunate that the war in Gaza has exacerbated the situation to the point where, humanitarian action by the international community has forced basically certain countries to recognize that there is a genocide in Gaza. And Great Britain today stands to its moral and historic responsibility in recognizing the state of Palestine. I might agree with you that on the ground it might not make a big difference, because the Israelis, supported by the United States of America, is continuing with the invasion of Gaza, is continuing with the genocide, and they're not paying heed to the international law, neither to the international community. But this is a breakthrough when it comes to symbolic gestures, where the international community more and more is isolating the state of Israel, and it's looking at its Zionist project as something that will exacerbate convulsive violence to continue in the Middle East region.
What do you say to critics of this move who say it is simply rewarding Hamas, a terrorist organization, which certainly doesn't recognize the right of Israel to exist?
Well, actually, in principle, Hamas, has been weakened by this war. Hamas knows that there are certain facts on the ground that they have to face. They cannot go back to rule Gaza because it is over. And eventually, most of the leaders of Hamas are outside the country. And everybody knows, even our president has said it time and again, that Hamas should stop being part and parcel of ruling Gaza. And as we know, that the international community consensually believe that Hamas has no position as when the dust settles, as we say. And we believe that Hamas politically, basically, might continue its action, but militarily on the ground, I think it is over. And that's why it's not a reward for Hamas. First of all, stopping the war is an act where Palestinians could breathe from the genocide. Second, humanitarian aid will go in. Thirdly, the reconstruction of Gaza will be handled by the international community with the participation of the Palestinian Authority. We have to look at it as the glass being half full rather than half empty. We believe that the fate of Hamas, after this war is over.
Does Hamas have any place in this Palestinian state, which is now increasingly widely recognized?
Well, if Hamas accepts the quartet principles, the recognition of the state of Israel, what have you, and if they meet the principles of the PLO and its charter, basically, and they would like to become part and parcel of the PLO, then there will be in the political structure of the Palestinian political system, and they can be in opposition, I mean, politically. But as far as militia and what have you, there is no room for Hamas in the future government.
And if they don't accept the right of Israel to exist, they would be excluded.
They will be excluded, of course, because this is a basic principle that the PLO has accepted when the quartet put the four conditions. So if they don't accept to that principle, they cannot be part and parcel of the PLO. They have to stick to the two-state solution and recognize the state of Israel on the border of 1967.
What do you think is going to happen now? I mean, obviously, as we say, a majority of states at the United Nations have recognized the Palestinian state for a long time. But in practical terms, it seems that given what's happened in Gaza, given what's happening in the West Bank, as a physical reality, a Palestinian state seems further away than ever.
Well, actually, what you say is absolutely right. But you see, conditions could be irreversible, And the dismantling of settlements could take place if we agree on the two-state solution. Now, with the E1 plan, the division between North and South is so visible where there is no geographic contiguity. This is a blow to the idea of a two-state solution. But if we go back to the basic principles of the Oslo Accords, I think everything could be really negotiated. We cannot just give in because Israel unilaterally is basically trying to expand through creeping annexation and trying to control the settlements to the point where the non-contiguity geographic to the Palestinians is blowing into the air the two-state solution. But everybody knows that there is no military solution to this conflict, and everybody knows that the two-state solution is the basic historic compromise which the PLO have made in 1988. So either Israel would accept the two-state solution and end of conflict, or Palestinians would start pushing for a one-state solution, a democratic, secular state. So demographically, the Israelis are not going to accept this because in the future, the majority will be Palestinians. So the best option for Israel to circumvent all kinds of violence, let's say, is to accept the two-state solution. And they have accepted it through labor parties and what have you. But for the last 13 years, Netanyahu and his conservative governments all along have been struggling to abort the two-state solution, to abort the Oslo Accords, because the messianic dreams of Prime Minister Netanyahu, with the biblical prophecy of Eretz Israel, Judea and Samaria, is coming back to the fore as the basic rhetoric today for the Zionist ideology in Israel. So today, the international community has exposed, basically, the Zionist project. Now you see a lot of vociferous voices from all over the country that Israel is a Zionist project, is a colonial settler project. It has to stop its military activity, and it has to go back to the politique réelle of negotiating a settlement which is based on international law, Oslo Agreement, the two-state solution.
But isn't the truth of it that we are in this situation now because Yasser Arafat walked away from a potential two-state solution, and many people may therefore question the sincerity of the Palestinian leadership today?
The Palestinian leadership today, with President Abu Mazen, has from day one accepted the fact that there is no military solution. He has accepted that violence breeds violence. He accepted peace movement. He accepted pragmatically the two-state solution through a negotiated settlement, discussing even the contours of the borders when to finalize this conflict. He has been pragmatic enough. He has been accepted by the international community. He has been all against, kind of violent activities. I think, the problem will be God give him the strength. If President Abu Mazen is not there, I think hell will break loose. We don't know who will control and what would be the ideology of any kind of a leader that comes after President Abbas. So President Abbas is the key to security and peace in the Middle East, and he has been shouldering his responsibility, but unfortunately the Israelis have never responded positively. And look, 11 years, Netanyahu has never met, our president.
Manuel Hassassian, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Well, the recognition is going to take place formally at the United Nations in the coming days during the annual United Nations General Assembly. Let's get the views now of Lord Malloch-Brown, Mark Malloch-Brown, who is a former United Nations General Secretary and a Secretary General, Deputy Secretary General, and also a Minister for the UN in the government of Gordon Brown. Hello to you.
Hi, Adam.
How significant a moment do you think this is in practice?
Well, I think you've been asking the right questions of the last interviewee. It is significant in the sense that it's a reminder to Israel, a very fierce reminder, that there is only a political solution to this problem, that their extraordinary military success since October the 7th has changed the playing field in some quite dramatic ways, but that they simply cannot get to a sustainable solution by this means, and that every day that civilians die unnecessarily in the West Bank and Gaza is, a further step back towards the day that Israelis will be able to live in peace with their neighbors. And so, while, as you rightly say, it's hardly an opportune moment for a two-state solution when, both communities are raging with hatred towards the other, nevertheless, it is important to insist as the international community that a political agreement between the two sides is ultimately the only way you're going to get to a peace that will last.
I just wonder what the auspices would be for a peace negotiation, given the attitude of the Trump administration and given the divisions at the United Nations. I mean, who could actually broker some sort of talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians?
Well, the United Nations has completely seemed sidelined itself. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, who's often said the right things about this conflict, nevertheless, seems to be close to persona non grata with the Israelis, as are a number of his senior officials. Now, it's not the first time that Israel has, really had it with the UN. I lived through some periods which were pretty intense at the time, even if they weren't as bad as today. But somehow the UN, as the representative of the world community, needs to come back into this. So do and possibly spearheading an effort by sort of middle powers and European powers to create, along with regional players, some kind of platform to guarantee a negotiating forum. I think, the whole world is being held hostage by the extraordinarily sort of idiosyncratic, unreliable, unpredictable behavior of President Trump. We simply can't anymore stand by and let a rogue America, which is sadly what we've got to, in a sense, still dictate the terms of how peace is made around the world. Israel needs to recognize that even inside the United States, public opinion is moving against it, that Trump is not a bellwether for where America is on this. And, the good people have to gather together around this and create, a forum of counter pressure to the sort of free check that the Trump administration has given the Netanyahu regime until this point.
Are the Israeli hostages taken on October the 7th being forgotten in all of this?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, Keir Starmer today, I'm sure in his video, David Lammy earlier today, have both insisted that getting the hostages back is key, and it evidently is. When people talk about, a political solution and a two-state solution, that is no betrayal of the hostages and their situation. It's just a recognition that this ghastly conflict between these two sides is got to be found, a peacemaking end has to be found to it. And, a condition for that will be the release of all the hostages.
Some people, though, will feel that this looks like a reward for Hamas for continuing fighting.
No, I don't think so. I mean, well, some people will. You're right, of course, Adam. But I think they're wrong to say that. This goes back to Oslo. 140 countries have long since recognized the Palestinian statehood issue. We're latecomers to the party. One of probably up to 10 countries that will add their names to this tomorrow in the special meeting in New York. But this is not new, and the tragedy of October the 7th, happened because a conflict has been left to fester for 80 years. And, the lesson of peacemaking for a UN type like myself is you leave these conflicts to go on festering and through the generations, at great risk, at great peril to not just the communities involved, but the wider world as well, because, across generations, the sense of grievance just deepens. And whether it is Palestinians living in Gaza or the West Bank, or Palestinians who may be the children or grandchildren of exiles, this sense of the injustice of this is something which, is going to remain a destabilizing force for Israel, for the region and the world until it is satisfactorily addressed.
So the diplomatic status of Palestinian representative in this country will change. But as I understand it, it won't change at the United Nations, where they don't have full representation. So in that sense, it's rather a hollow gesture, isn't it?
Well, I mean, what they have at the United Nations is a pretty unique status with, half state, half not state. I mean, they don't meet, if you like, you're right, the full state condition of a territory which they control the foreign policy of and security policy of, etc. But they've enjoyed for some time now the full privileges of full representation as the equivalent of a nation state. There are other groups who are in a sort of halfway house state. They've been given a sort of preferential condition over that. So again, this is much more about the signaling that there's got to be a political solution to this than any immediate sort of status change for the Palestinians.
Lord Malloch-Brown, thank you very much indeed for joining us.